Let me demonstrate the muscles of the pectoral region and the anterior compartment of the arm. In the pectoral region, the first muscle we are looking is the pectoris major. The muscle is supplied by the medial and the lateral pectoral nerves. These nerves come from the medial and the lateral cord. The muscle is attached to the lateral lip of the intertubercular sulcus. Contraction of these fibers will bring the arm into horizontal flexion position, while the contraction of the lower fibers will bring the arm into the vertical flexion position. This triangular muscle underneath is pec minor, attaches to the ribs, second, third and fourth, fifth, and the tip of the coracoid process. This is also supplied by the medial pectoral nerve. The function of this muscle is depressing the scapula by pulling over the coracoid process. The muscles of the anterior compartment of the arm, the small muscle which I am pointing at this point is the coracobrachialis, pierced by the musculocutaneous nerve, coming with the short head of the biceps from the tip of the coracoid process. Short head of the biceps is joining here with the long head of the biceps, and you can see near the probe the tendon lying in the intertubercular groove. The biceps muscle attaches to the radial tuberosity. The main function of this muscle is flexion on the shoulder joint and the flexion at the elbow joint. It is also a very strong supinator of the forearm. In children, this muscle is not very well developed, and this is the reason they cannot supinate. Underneath the biceps, the muscle which is I am pointing is the brachialis. The brachialis is also a flexor of the elbow joint. Biceps, brachialis and coracobrachialis are supplied by the musculocutaneous nerve, and these muscles as a group are called as BBC muscles. Let me demonstrate the deltoid muscle. It is a muscle with three distinct parts, and every part has a particular function. The anterior fibers, middle fibers and the posterior fibers. All the fibers come and join together at the deltoid tuberosity. Anterior fibers help in flexion. Middle fibers are the abductor of the shoulder joint. As you can see, these fibers are crossing this shoulder joint superiorly. Contraction of these fibers lifts the arm in abduction. The posterior fiber help in the extension of the arm at the shoulder joint. The muscle is supplied by the axillary nerve from the posterior cord. As you remember, the axillary nerve passes through the anatomical neck. A fracture in the anatomical neck is going to crush the axillary nerve, which in result into the loss of abduction of the shoulder. Posterior compartment of the arm contains only one muscle, triceps. As the name suggests, triceps has got three heads. The only head we can see is the long head. The long head comes from the infraglenoid tubercle, joins with the medial and the lateral head and attaches to the olecranon process. As a rule, everything in the posterior compartment of the arm is supplied by the radial nerve, so this muscle is supplied by the radial nerve. The long head extends the arm and the whole muscle extends the elbow. On a scapular region, the first muscle we are looking here is the trapezius. Trapezius is not a muscle of the upper limb, but indirectly it moves the scapula, so it helps in moving the upper limb. It's supplied by the cranial nerve 11. The second muscle which we are looking here is the infraspinatus, part of the rotator cuff muscle. The second muscle we are looking is the teres minor, another rotator cuff muscle. These are the main function of these muscle is the lateral rotation of the humerus. Teres major, this muscle crosses the joint anteriorly and attaches into the medial lip of the intertubercular groove. This muscle then does adduction, medial rotation and extension of the arm. This big muscle, which is covering the lower part of the back, wraps around is the latissimus dorsi. The latissimus dorsi attaches at the floor of the intertubercular groove. It is supplied by thoracodorsal nerve. This muscle gives us the at ease position. That means extension, medial rotation and adduction. Muscles in the anterior compartment of the forearm, which is also known as flexor compartment, are set in 3 layers. The first layer contains the flexor of the wrist on the radial side and on the ulnar side. It also contains a pronator. In the second layer, we see the flexus of the PIP joint on the fingers, and in the third or the deepest layer, we see the flexus of the DIP joint of the fingers, which is the distal proximal joint, as well as the flexor of the thumb. The first layer contains 4 muscles which take origin from the common flexor tendon from the medial epicondyle. The first muscle I am looking here is the pronator teres. Pronator teres attaches on the midway on the shaft of the radius and pronates the middle part of the radius over the ulna. The second muscle which we are looking here is the flexor carpi radialis. This muscle is going to flex the radial side of the wrist. This thin muscle is the palmaris longus, absent in 30% of people and not a very important muscle. This muscle which I am pointing is the flexor of the wrist on the ulnar side, so it is flexor carpi ulnaris. These muscles, 3 muscles are supplied by the median nerve except flexor carpi ulnaris, which is supplied by the ulnar nerve. The second or the intermediate layer contains only one muscle, which I am holding right now with my probe, is flexor digitorum superficialis. This muscle has 4 distinct tendons for 4 fingers. These muscles are going to flex the PIP joints of the digits. Between the intermediate layer and the deep muscle layer, there is a nerve which we are looking right now is the median nerve. On the deeper layer, there are 3 muscles. The muscle I am looking here is the flexor digitorum profundus. Profundus means deep, and these are the flexor of the DIP joint of the 4 fingers. On this side, this tendon, when I am pulling on this tendon, you can see the movements on the thumb is the flexor of the flexor pollicis longus. So, this is the flexor of the thumb. The deepest muscle here is the pronator quadratus. It is quadrangular in shape, and the function is pronation of the lower end of the radius. So, it is almost like a tennis band lying on the anterior surface of the lower part of the radius and the ulna, and we can see some of the fibers very transversely placed. All the muscles in this forearm are supplied by median nerve except 1.5 muscle. The first muscle I told you, flexor carpi ulnaris, and half of the profundus. So, these are the 2 tendons here are supplied by the ulnar nerve. So, this compartment is mostly supplied by the median nerve except 1.5 muscle by the ulnar nerve. The muscles in the extensor compartment of the forearm are arranged into 3 different groups. On the radial side, there are 3 muscles. There are 3 muscles in the called as outcropping muscles, which cross the tendon of other muscles, and then we have got muscles on the ulnar side. The first muscle on this side we see is the brachioradialis. These 2 muscles are extensor of the wrist on the radial side, because on the flexor side we have seen there is only one flexor, but on the extensor side, because of having 2 extensor, we are able to hold heavy objects. This muscle here is the extensor radialis longus and the extensor radialis brevis. On this group of muscle, this 4 tendons and this big belly is the extensor digitorum. This is going to extend the digits at the PIP and the DIP joints of the finger. This muscle here is the extensor carpi ulnaris, only one extensor on the ulnar side. Looking at the outcropping muscle, this muscle here is the abductor pollicis longus, and these 2 here are the extensors of the thumb, extensor pollicis brevis, extensor pollicis longus. This area here in between these tendons is called as snuff box, and here we can see the radial artery. Also the base of this snuff box is formed by the scaphoid bone. Deep we see the two muscles here. This is, we already seen the tendon of the extensor pollicis longus, and this muscle here is the extensor indicis. As the name says, it goes to the index finger. We have got strong extension on the index finger, and that's why we can point. You can see there are two extensors going to the index finger. The last, a very small muscle which we are looking here. Now we can see this muscle. This is your extensor digiti minimi, goes to the little finger. Muscles in the hand are very important for the fine movements. Most of the hand muscles are supplied by the ulnar nerve, except the 5 muscles on the thumb side. There are 2 groups of muscle which are called hypothenar eminence and the thenar eminence, which is on the thumb side. We have got sets of muscle in the middle, interossei and the lumbricals. The muscles of the hypothenar eminence are 3 muscles: abductor digiti minimi, flexor digiti minimi, and opponens digiti minimi, which we cannot see in here. The 3 muscles which are forming the thenar eminence is abductor pollicis brevis, flexor pollicis brevis, and underneath here, if we can see some of the fibers of the opponens pollicis. These muscles are supplied by the recurrent branch of the median nerve. In the middle, we are looking at the tendons of the flexor digitorum superficialis, and deeper down we see the tendon of the profundus, flexor digitorum profundus. From the profundus, on the radial side, we see these worm-looking muscles originating from the tendon, and these muscles, so 1, 2, 3, 4 are called as lumbricals. Lumbricals in the hand are a very special muscle which allows us to hold the newspaper or say bye-bye, because these muscles, they flex the MP joint and extend the PIP and the DIP. These lumbricals, they cross the MP joint, which is metacarpophalangeal joints, anterior to this axis. So they flex this joint, the MP joint, and then they pass over the PIP and the DIP on its external surface. So they flex these joints. The function of the dorsal and palmar interossei are explained by the word pad, palmar, add to the midline, which is adduction, function is adduction, and dorsal, abduct, which is dab, pad and the dab. So, these are the muscles important for moving the fingers together or taking the fingers away from each other, especially from the midline, which is the middle finger. The muscle I am pointing is the adductor pollicis muscle, which helps to adduct the thumb. Now, deeper, if we lift up all these tendons, we are able to see some of the glimpse of the interossei. The interossei are 7 palmar, there are 7 interossei, 3 palmar and 4 dorsal. The dorsal interossei are much better seen on this view, especially the first dorsal interossei is seen between the thumb and the index finger. We can also see the second and the third and the fourth dorsal interossei. These abduct the fingers. Abduction of the finger is taking it from the midline or from the middle finger. So, the abduction here, these two muscles are going to abduct the middle finger away from the midline. So, we need 2 abductors for this. On this side, this dorsal interossei will abduct the index finger, and this dorsal interossei is going to abduct the ring finger. We do not need dorsal interossei for the little finger, as we have got abductor digiti minimi, and for the thumb we have got abductor pollicis longus and brevis. The nerve supply to the hand muscle is mostly by the ulnar nerve, except the 5 muscles, 3 of the thenar eminence of the thumb and the 2 lumbricals on the radial side.